So we welcome you to the session on resilient futures, financial sustainability and operational independence. The session is designed to offer practical guidance for ensuring long-term sustainability and independence, empowering NGOs to fulfill their missions and adapt to evolving funding environments. Poonam Choksi, who is the lead at Social Sector Capacity Building Vertical at A.T.E. Chandra Foundation, would be moderating this session. I hand over the stage to Poonam now.
Good afternoon, everybody. Why do you think this session is scheduled at 2:30? Yeah, very strategic. I was like, कौन सा session रखें जहाँ पे लोग नहीं सोएंगे? So we said, let's do fundraising. So much fun in the fundraising. So that's why we are here today to talk about it. So the pressure is on us to keep you awake and equally on you to stay awake for a very important topic. So yeah, I thought it'll be great to start with some questions here because of course fundraising is a topic that affects all of us day in and day out, ensures that we, don't sleep at night peacefully. So we thought it'll be nice to just get a sense of what's the approach to fundraising in the room or what's the room like when we talk about approach to fundraising. So I have 3 questions quickly and we can do a show of hands if if it applies to your organization. How many of you have a 3-year budget growth trajectory with a clear fundraising plan? Okay, lovely. Lovely to see some hands up. How many of you have raised more than 10% of your total budget through retail funding, that is everyday giving? Okay, lovely. So I need to know who that gentleman there is for sure now. And how many of you have corpus or reserves that can cover the cost for your organization for the next 6 to 9 months? Okay, thankfully more hands there. But the questions were important, difficult, and if you had no to even any one of the answer, you're in the right room. Because today in the sessions, we have 3 real-life case studies that are going to unpack different aspects of financial resilience. And without actually telling what it really means, we will actually, get the speakers to tell about their experience, their stories, their journeys in their organization and how they managed to achieve or crack some of these difficult questions. So first speaker I would like to really invite upon is an organization that I have known very closely for the last 5 years. His name is Ajay, who runs the fundraising and partnerships at OGQ, which is Olympic Gold Quest. They work with Indian athletes to help them achieve gold. Very clear, targeted vision, Olympic Gold Quest. Couldn't have better explained themselves in their name of the organization. Fun fact about Ajay, he is former world badminton champion and has been at position 13. So yeah, we have an athlete in the room, guys. And what better way to get the people who are, benefiting, talk about the stories, for fundraising. So I think it's a very strategic move at OGQ that they have a lot of athletes who actually do their fundraising because then the stories are coming from the heart and from a place of need and not just, somebody else telling somebody else's stories. So already I've given you one piece of insight from what they do. What's most striking about OGQ is that while many organizations excel at, building a strategic program plans for the 3 to 5 years, they have the same kind of rigor and razor-sharp focus in building an intentional fundraising strategy and a plan. I remember when I had met one of the team members, Neha, in 2020, when we were all trying to just get through COVID, and the budget was 40 crore. And I said, what does your next 3 or 5 years look like? And she said, yeah, we want to get to 80 crore by 24. And they are here today at 80 crores. So they have been extremely intentional, and this is not when they were at 40. They started when they were 4 crores. That intentionality to fundraising has been from the time, they have been existing and doing this work. And while they're, of course, growing the impact, they have actually, of course, supported many more athletes. So when they started in 2010, the number of athletes they were supporting 15, and today they are at 395 athletes. So with that, let's try to unpack what and how, this intentionality can be embedded in the way we, plan our fundraising. So over to you, Ajay. The stage is yours. Please welcome and looking forward to your insights with everybody here in the room.
Thanks for that kind introduction, Poonam. Very good afternoon to all of you. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you all for joining. Uh, yes, as Poonam mentioned, I played a bit of badminton. I retired about 3 years back. I briefly worked with McKinsey as a consultant and been with OGQ. I had partnerships there. I've been there for the last 10 months. A few folks have asked me, why did you make that switch from McKinsey to OGQ? And honestly, being part of a team that empowers or fuels the journeys of Olympic and Paralympic athletes made for a far more compelling cause than, giving advice to folks on topics I had absolutely no clue about. So, that was an easy choice. Anyway, so OGQ is a not-for-profit started by two of India's sporting legends, Mr. Geet Sethi and Prakash Padukone. And for the younger folks in the room, Prakash Padukone is not just Deepika Padukone's father. He's an absolute badminton legend. They started it with a very sharp mission, which is to help Indian athletes win Olympic and Paralympic gold medals. In the last 4 Olympics, India has won a total of 21 medals, and the training of 13 of those medal winners was supported by OGQ. In the recently concluded Paris Paralympics, India won a staggering total of 29 medals, and the training of 25 of those medal winners were supported by OGQ. By the way, allowed to clap, huh, guys? Yeah. Since the inception of OGQ, that goal and mission has been crystal clear, and all our strategies, right from fundraising, allocating budgets, has been absolutely in line and in sync with that mission and goal. So just wanted to jump into the budget planning. We plan our budgets at the start of each Olympic cycle, and we sort of take a top-down approach. So the first step in that would be to identify or have a target in terms of the number of medals we sort of hope to win in the following cycle. For example, right after the Tokyo Olympics for the Paris cycle, we had sort of estimated a target that India should win a total of about 8 to 10 medals, of which we estimated OGQ supported athletes to win roughly about 60% of that, which would come to about 5-6 medals. In order to win these medals, we figured that we needed to have at least around 40 to 50 athletes from OGQ to qualify for the Olympics, which meant that for that to happen, we needed to have or support the journeys of roughly over 250 Olympic athletes. We then chalked out a budget for every single athlete with an average of about 15 to 20 lakhs for the senior athlete and about 10 to 12 for the junior. So that sort of gave us an estimate of the budgets needed to support the Olympic program. We then took a very similar approach for the Paralympic program as well. And lastly, this gave us an idea in terms of how we needed to plan our resources and capacity building. In fact, when right after the Tokyo cycle, we were roughly about a 50-member team at OGQ. Today, we more than doubled that. We are at about 110 members at OGQ. Just wanted to, show quickly how we sort of scaled up over the years. And not just in the sort of volume or the number of athletes that we've been supporting, but also in the quality and depth of support, which we believe is very crucial, when you're working at the excellence. So as you can see, in 2012, we added the junior program, and currently that's been scaling up. We support close to about 150 athletes, junior athletes. We added the coaches program in 2016, the Paralympic program in 2019, and formalized that with a separate team in 21 when we realized we had the budgets to support them. Another very important part here, I think a lot of us probably shy away, is working closely with the government. Very early on, we realized that, to make a sort of a good impact in the sporting ecosystem, especially where the government is a big stakeholder, it became very necessary to collaboratively work with the government. So Mr. Viren Raskina, who's our CEO and of course ex-India hockey captain, he's on some of the committees of the Sports Authority of India and plays a very active role in actually influencing some good policy decisions, driving effective utilization of funds, which of course has a massive impact on the budget allocations as well. Um since actually, we started operations in way back in 2001 when Geetsa and Prakasa founded it, but it took them almost 7 years to actually raise the first check. And since 2009, it sort of picked up speed more when Viren joined. And it still took almost 7 years to reach the 10 CR mark. But post that, we've sort of scaled up more rapidly, almost doubling every Olympic cycle. And I just wanted to run you through some of the key elements that we believed helped us in this journey. So yeah, first and foremost is having a really credible and invested board. So at OGQ, all our board members are very actively involved right from the vision, strategy, and of course even fundraising. So we don't just do reporting to the board, we very actively engage them, keep them inspired, updated, which in turn motivates them to help us in fundraising. In fact, we have one board member who personally isn't very specifically connected to sport, but he still loves the work we do and is very actively involved, one of the most active involved members in terms of helping us with fundraising, right from strategy, making the connects. So I think when it's very important for the leadership team of an NGO to actually add the right profile of board members along the journey who can actually take them forward. The second, of course, is building capacity in the fundraising function of the NGO. At OGQ, we treat fundraising as important a function as the core work. We take special sort of importance in investing in the right hires, right from the front-facing donor-facing part, and also the back-end part of the partnerships team. So actually, Viren joined in 2009, but he was solely in the front donor-facing for a good about 8 years. In 2017, Neha Agarwal, who Poonam mentioned, who's also an ex-Olympian, by the way, she played table tennis for India in the 2008 Beijing Olympics. She joined, and that had a massive impact in terms of us scaling up. Having an ex-athlete who has gone through that struggles, talk about the work that OGQ does, just brought about the story in a far more credible manner. And in fact, even when I joined, it was just natural for me also to gravitate towards the partnership and fundraising function. In fact, apart from Viren, now we have 3 other ex-international athletes who are sort of leading the fundraising aspect of things. And I think we've also invested and expanded the back-end part of the partnerships team. And I think the core point here is to sort of really take fundraising as a very important function and invest in that specifically. And last, but probably the most important, is in terms of building those donor relationships. I'd like to point out that in the last few years, we've had a retention rate of donors of close to about 90%. And I just wanted to take you to some of the points that has helped us on that. The first thing is in terms of engagement with donors. And specifically with sort of the big CSR companies, there are so many stakeholders at different levels. And it's very important to keep them all updated and engaged, right from the leadership team to the operational CSR team. And that has really sort of worked well for us, which leads us to the next point, which is we have a very strong email communication that we send out at fairly frequent intervals. We ensure that the messaging is right, the tone is right, there's a right emotional aspect to it, crisp data points. So we don't do long newsletters at all because we believe no one really reads them. I know if I get one, I would probably not read that as well. And then I think, diversifying the profile of donors is something I think will be touched upon later as well. I think getting rid of friction for companies is, again, a very important aspect. A lot of the companies look at CSR as a box to tick. So having a sort of end-to-end seamless process for them becomes very important. And in fact, that sort of circles back to the point of really investing well in your hires in terms of the back-end partnerships team, the compliance, and all of that. The next point is actually a big thanks to actually A.T.E, Chandra for sort of supporting on capacity building and also guiding us on requesting donors to also contribute to admin costs. We were actually quite reluctant to do this ourselves, but with that push, we actually did that and got really surprisingly good results. In fact, to point out, last financial year, we had 87 companies who actually contributed towards admin costs. And 7% of the CSR funds that we raised actually were purely towards this admin cost, which was a massive boon for us actually. And finally, the board of OGQ consciously made a sort of decision to keep a low profile on social media, on public domain general, which meant that our biggest sort of way to expand our supporter base was through referrals of existing donors. And because of the effective engagement and the constant communication, almost all our sort of existing supporters are very happy to make these warm introductions. And we've also, tried sort of cold reach outs and sort of other methods to sort of reach out, but we haven't seen sufficient conversions on those fronts. So this is something that has really worked well for us. So currently we have close to about, last year we had 140 companies supporting us, close to about, I think about 200 plus individuals supporting us, and all these are folks about the quantum of 50K. So it all came, most of them came through the referrals of existing donors. So I think that effective engagement and communication sort of plays a very important role here. I just want to leave you with, a few takeaways here. I won't take too much time on this. I think having that long-term vision and planning becomes very important. Treating fundraising as important a function as the core becomes, again, very crucial. Building those strong relationships with the donors. Again, having a great and invested board of directors who are involved in your strategy becomes important. Actually, before I end, I just, we work with a lot of athletes and para-athletes, which is extremely inspiring. It's one of the reasons I'm here, which motivates me to come in daily. Some of the stories of these athletes and para-athletes are super inspiring. So we work with this one, we've been supporting this one para-archer, which you might have heard of, Sheetal Devi. She comes from a very remote place in Jammu called Katra. Sheetal unfortunately was born without arms. So extremely just routine activities that you and I take for granted, right from, drinking a glass of water, changing clothes, going to a washroom. She can't do on her own. She needs a 24/7 escort. But what she manages to do impeccably well is shoot an arrow at a target that's almost 50 meters away. We can barely even see that target. And she competes against other para-archers who have disabilities, but all of them have lower limb disabilities. So they still have their hands. That tension in the drawstring is so tight, if you and I try to hold it, our hands will quiver. She came to our office, a couple of, about 3-4 months ago. She recently won the bronze medal at the Paris Paralympics as well. And we just have a short sort of video that I'd like to play. The video played at the end. Yeah, but anyway, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, we've seen that video many times, and it's really very inspirational, just as human beings, to see what is the potential. So thank you so much, Ajay, for sharing the lovely insights. I think we've seen their journey up close, and we know that, I think one of the key takeaways is how do you leverage the board for fundraising. I think they have those champion board members, and I think the fun fact is they give board members targets of fundraising. So I think if we can really do that, and say that them holding us accountable, can we also reverse the tables and say you're equally accountable to make this successful? I think it's a great aha. So thank you so much for sharing your journey with all of us today. So yes, now that we know a little bit of intentional planning, to the fundraising, I want to call upon my second speaker, who is also a very dear friend. We worked together closely, when I used to work at Adhyayan. And her name is Anushri Alva. Fun fact first, she prefers working with dogs than humans. So she said that, okay, I didn't say that. I think it's just hard to work with humans for social change, so I think she realized dogs are easier. Another fun fact, interesting fact, she's traveled almost whole of India, I think barring 2 states, and she's worked and engaged with more than 200 schools across the country and, helped them support in their quality improvement journeys directly. I think what excites us about this story that we are going to present about today is how do you really make yourself very resilient? by not depending on one single donor. I think I worked with a startup at some point in my career, and I know that when we start these journeys, we are heavily dependent on first two anchor donors who are our champions. But then as we grow our impact and our organization, we really forget to say we need to also diversify that donor base. And I know Adhyayan's story personally because, there was a time in COVID where, they almost planned to shut shop. So from not even surviving, it was shutting shop, the, organization to now thriving organization, from one donor to having 15 plus donors, from, that to actually today, making a mark in 5+ states and delivering quality of education systematically, I think is a quite inspirational journey for us at A.T.E. Chandra Foundation. So I humbly call upon Anushri and share her wonderful story in a very interesting and engaging manner because I've seen the presentation. So yes, over to you.
Thank you, Poonam, and thanks everybody for coming for a post-lunch session. I do believe this is an act of courage to show up after lunch and stay awake, so thank you. Okay, so in 2020, my organization, Adhyayan Foundation, was 3 years old, and we had a team of about 17 people. We had this one statewide program where we supported 800 plus schools. We were doing really well. We were poised to scale. And we were really excited, and we had this one major donor, and we had this statewide program. Then in April 2020, that one major donor called me, and he said, I'm so sorry, we have to divert all our money to the PM Relief Fund, so we're concluding your grant. And so now we had one major state and 0 institutional donors, and our team size went down to 5 people. And it's at this very exciting point in my life that Adhyayan's diversification journey began, where I was like, oh my God, you need more than one donor, right? And so if I had to describe our story in 2 phrases, I would say it's the story of a 3-piece suit and a unicorn, okay? So as we started the journey of diversification, we said, okay, where do we start? Let's start with institutional donors because there's traction for our kind of work with institutional donors. So let's begin there. And we had often heard of 3 criteria when it comes to institutional donors. We had heard that you need access, like you have to have warm introductions, like Ajay was saying. We also, you need to have ticket size that matches, and you need to have alignment and fit. So the access part felt pretty straightforward. We said, okay, access, let's start with our board. Let's get them to start making the introductions, doing all of that. Let's reach out to peer organizations who are supported by people, we want to be supported by too and get introductions. Let's look at open applications and let's get advice from peer organizations. So this was okay. But I think the piece that we really had to start interrogating was this idea of ticket size and fit. So this is where the conception of the 3-piece suit comes in, right? So between 2018 and 2020, we had a donor that fit us like a 3-piece suit, like a well-made 3-piece suit, right? Like they checked all our boxes. They cared about having a systemic lens, data-driven governance in education, government and scale, a bottom-up approach. They would fund the whole thing. They wouldn't do piecemeal stuff. They would give you capacity support, org support. They were flexible. So this was ideal. We were in love, and we're this is our whole checklist. So in 2020, this was our definition of fit. We said this is the fit for us. But when we started diversifying, we realized that we have to switch something in our head. We have to think of fit as modular and not this whole, right? So at this point, I'll step back a little and tell you something about our work, right? What do we do? So we essentially partner with state governments to help them enable a good school for every child. And we work with leaders. We build the capacity of leaders to learn how to assess their schools. And we take a very holistic approach with school quality. So what you see on your screen is we look at 46 parameters of quality, 7 areas of quality. We get leaders involved in assessing schools, monitoring schools, working with each other. So the work is very systemic. It involves many, many stakeholders, and it's a little long term. And we kept expecting that donors will support this whole thing. So if we go with the whole thing, they'll support the whole thing. And we slowly realized that, we have to switch that idea. And we had to make things modular. We had to think of the 3-piece suit as the sum of its parts, right? So we started breaking down our larger program and we started saying, okay, like let's take different aspects of school quality and starting to see how we can get support from different donors. So we had like a read aloud program emerge, a career guidance program, a sports program. And this way we were able to appeal to CSR donors with smaller ticket sizes and who wanted to see year-on-year shift, and we were able to break it down. But one of the risks that this kind of modular diversification runs into is this, a lack of cohesion. Like you can suddenly start seeming like you're doing a bunch of disparate things that has nothing to do with your larger mission. And so what we worked really hard on was to talk to our donors, like through our monthly reports, through our conversations, by getting them involved in our org strategy, to start saying that you are supporting a part, but this is the whole, and this is the whole idea, and this is the mission. So now at this point, we are consistently able to keep about 7 to 8 CSR donors who are with us, who are supporting different parts, but really buy into the whole and advocate for the whole. So once we sort of stabilized our programs and diversified in that way with CSR, we started to think about all those things that, those wonderful things that keep many of us awake at night. We're like, how do you find the right fit donor for things like strategic growth, for back-end costs, for reserves, emergencies, experiments? Like, where do you find that, right? And that's when we had to discard this idea of the three-piece suit completely and think of fit not just as form and being modular, but also about having flexibility. So fit now became a sari, right? Like it's not a three-piece suit anymore. It has structure. A sari has structure. It has modular parts, but it also has a pallu, which is flexible and versatile. You need a little bit of that, right? So we said, okay, where are we going to find this? And we found 3 sources for this. So one was family foundations, fee-for-service, and retail. So with family foundations, we realized that we could pitch 3 types of things: experiments and innovations, the things we were trying out. So like we tried a public libraries program and saw how it influences government schools. We also said that organizational needs like people practices, fundraising, that's where we really got support from family foundations. And then looking at stuff for our future growth. So like strategic stuff like tech was where family foundations supported us. Fee-for-service was pretty straightforward. In government partnerships, wherever the government was willing to put in money, we would take that as a fee-for-service, and we capped it at 19 lakhs to avoid GST because we have a for-profit arm that can take in a lot more as fee-for-service and has GST. So we sort of, made this choice within our not-for-profit arm. But the one that actually would get really tricky for us is retail and individuals, right? Like we knew, okay, retail and individuals is important to have that flexibility, but in our three-piece suit idea, like the retail donor was just not a fit. We were like, how do we talk about systemic governance to an individual without making them fall asleep, right? We just feel like, oh, this is not a fit. But then, in the sari idea, we started saying, okay, you have to appeal to them differently. You can't talk to them about programs, but we have to help people from our organization talk to them as people and say, why do you do this work? Why are you passionate? So we started doing an annual fundraising campaign where we sort of clear our calendar for 3 days every year. Everybody participates in the organization. We're a team of about 40 people. And we play it as a virtual board game in teams, which is basically a murder mystery which we solve. And there's a board game, there are tiles, and as you sort of keep solving stuff, tiles open up and they make you raise money. They make you do different actions to raise money. And as we started doing this, we realized that we had developed a vocabulary and a way to interact with individual donors that was very authentic to our stories and how we as a team wanted to tell our stories from the field. And also then gradually we started, this retail donor who we never thought was anybody and we would just keep on the side. We slowly started growing a pool that continued to support us. And we started developing an engagement strategy with them where we started sending them gratitude notes. We hold gratitude spaces with them. All of us from our leadership call them every quarter, thank them. So we suddenly opened up this world which we didn't think would be there, and it gave us a lot of flexibility. And now we raise about 30 to 45 lakhs through that and getting our entire team to raise. So this concludes the three-piece suit versus sari type of fit idea in our diversification journey. But I'll talk to you now about the unicorn, right? I said this is also the story about the unicorn. And that's because to start diversification, you need people. You need people to raise money, and we had nobody dedicated to that in 2020. So a family foundation gave us a lifeline grant and said, please hire a fundraiser. and please, like, start building that vertical out. And so when we got this money, we were like, okay, now we're going to hire this amazing person who's basically a unicorn, right? And sorry, I didn't show you that, but that's like the range of channel mix right now. But we basically wanted to hire a unicorn. And if you've ever watched Indian matchmaking, you know how they put that list for the prospective partner, right? Should have good hair, tall, this, that. We had one list like that, which was like, oh, this person should have worked 8+ years. They should have raised for 5 small NGOs, 2 crores or more, many channels. They'll create world-class collateral. They will pitch. They will convert donors. And all this we are doing in the middle of COVID when there's no money for anything, right? And we also wanted them to help us live happily ever after. We were like, we have to find this person. And then we started hiring, and we found people who were very good at their craft and who were 8+ years of experience, had raised. But our circumstance was so unique and unprecedented that it was getting really hard for them. They were not able to think creatively. They were also feeling very pressured by the targets. So I think 3 months into one such engagement, we realized one thing, which is that the truth about unicorns is that they don't exist, right? They're not real. So we said, okay, let's take that money, split it up, hire 2 young, bright people who will do the basics, the process. So we said, you don't have any targets of fundraising. We as a leadership team will take that. What you need to do is one of you will do lead generation and report writing, the other of you will do retail, and you just keep doing the process, and we'll do the rest from there. And that really worked wonders for us. Today we work in 7 states, we impact 4,000+ schools, we have a team of about 40, and the diversification journey has really helped cushion us, because even when we lose a donor, we know it doesn't hit us in a big way, and we're able to sort of bounce back and manage with our reserves, manage with everything else. And now we also have a nice, fun pool of donors who are champions for us and who advocate for our work, when initially I think we had just that one champion and donor. And if I had to tell you what my takeaways are, it's that think of fit as a sari, not as a 3-piece suit. It's modular, it's cohesive, it's flexible. Don't look for unicorns. And diversification and fundraising really is a team sport, especially when you're smaller, like really involve your whole team and take everybody along. So thank you so much.
I have heard this story many times, but it never gets, boring. It's always exciting to hear and, feel inspired that, somebody could turn around, this, but with intentionality, with the right kind of, resources and pivoting. I think for me, what was really interesting that, they realized that there's no unicorn. So what is the next best thing that we can do rather than say fundraising sucks and, there is no money out there. So I think really saying that what works for you may not work for everybody, but I think constantly learning and trying is very, very important. Thank you, Anushri, for sharing that insights. I think Fundopoly, lovely word. People should check that out. I'm sure a lot of people took the photographs, Anushri, so we might want to make that viral. Great. So I think some part of it is covered in the other 2, but we call upon the third and the most important part of the puzzle, which we always question ourselves, is how do I get this unrestricted funding, which everybody is always, struggling and, feeling starved for, right? And I know we all want to address that question, and especially when you are not doing programmatic work. Generally when programmatic work, there's tangible outcomes, or there's more tangibility in the way you can demonstrate the impact that you are achieving. But somebody who's not doing program, but doing policy advocacy and then raising unrestricted funds, how is this happening? How do we learn from that? So we really bring upon the third speaker today, and needs no introduction, but still I'm going to say it's Arghya Sengupta, one of the co-founders of Vidhi. Fun fact, he loves singing the song to his 3-year-old from Lion King. So maybe he'll hum a little bit for us at the end of this presentation. But I think, a lot of inspiring work, that Vidhi does impacts day in and day out to all of us. But they have built a phenomenal donor base who supports them with a lot of, do not limit their work by putting any restrictions in the way they do work. So I think there's a lot of learning and insights for us to learn today. So over to you, Arghya. Welcome to this third part. And then we'll move to the Q&A part with all 3 of them, with all of you posting a lot of questions to them. Yeah. So yes, Arghya, you have 10 minutes before we open the stage for all the Q&A. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Poonam. I think given that introduction, I should just come here and say Hakuna Matata. And I won't sing it. I won't torture you like I torture my son. But it's a real pleasure to be here. And I think while singing Hakuna Matata might seem a little bit facetious, I think there are many times in this fundraising journey where it is important for us to remain calm, because it feels like there is no light at the end of the tunnel. It may feel like we are not going to be able to raise this funding, but there is always some way that opens up. So in this 10 minutes, and I see that I have this unenviable countdown clock, I'm going to tell you a little bit about our journey and this magic mantra of flexible funding, which often seems a bit like that unicorn, which doesn't exist. But you have to look hard enough. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of our learnings over the course of the last 11 years at Vidhi. For those of you who don't know, our mission at Vidhi is to help write better laws for India. And we do that through research. We do that through engagement with government and civil society. So jumping straight in. So this is our problem statement, that raising unrestricted funding from domestic donors is a significant challenge, and securing corpus funding is even more difficult. Now, of course, everyone in this room knows this to be true, and I'm not looking at foreign funding here. That's a different ballgame, and I can discuss that separately. So the question is, how can we effectively address these barriers and ensure financial sustainability and operational independence? So there are 3 verbs for you that have held us in good stead during our journey. That's dream, engage, and minimize. And I'll explain each of these to you. Dream, as in this idea, is a very simple one. As I said, Vidhi helps write better laws for India. This is our dream, that we live in a country, and this is not just true of India, as in it's true of most countries, where laws are written in this dense legalese that you need a lawyer to interpret, and most people you talk to was like, oh, ye to vakilo wali kaam hai, ye to mujhe nahi karna hai. And it actually could be a very simple statement saying that don't blow your horn, but it will be written in such dense legalese that you will not be able to understand it without the help of a lawyer. But it doesn't have to be that way. So our dream is that of a day when all laws are written in a way that every citizen can understand in English, Hindi, or a language of their choice. That's our dream. And we want to help the country get there. So you need a simple statement, a simple dream that everybody understands. Then is engage. I think this is what is critical and has stood us in good stead, that we focus on depth and not breadth in funder engagement. And what do I mean by that? Is that as far as our institutional funders are concerned, that is those who give flexible funding, we currently have a total of 8 or 9 institutional funders, 5 of whom have been institutional funders from day 0 of the organization. So what we have, the learning that has happened over the course of the last 10 years is that it's critical, once you have funders in, it's critical to invest in funder engagement. This is the most critical part, because we spend a lot of time, and a lot of our discussion today has been about how to acquire new funders. And that is the hardest part. Without access, what are the routes that we should follow? But it's critical that we forget what's in at home. And what's at home is essentially that you have someone who's invested. So focus on depth and not breadth. And third, it may seem odd that this word is minimize. It seems like it doesn't fit in terms of those aspirational verbs that people usually use. But the reason I say minimize is in terms of minimize collateral. This has been one learning over the course of the last 10 years, that when we used to go for our early meetings, we had a 2-pager, we had a longer concept note, we had a budget document, and all of which was separate. And as you know very quickly, as in people have very limited attention spans. So this is when we turned 10 in 2020, last year. I mean, we put out a simple coffee table book that encapsulated our journey. We thought that this would actually be a book which would just capture the 10 years, what's happened, what the learnings have been, and what the impact has been. But actually, this has been our single most important fundraising collateral in the last 1.5 years. So I think it's very critical to focus your energies on minimizing collaterals and making it 1 or 2 things that work for you. So I'm going to focus on two specific case studies that we embarked on over the course of the last 10 years. The first is the Vidhi rights issue. This was COVID, April 2020, a time that Anushri also spoke about, which was a difficult time for everybody. Our situation was not exactly similar to Adhyayan because we didn't have one funder, but we had one big funder who did pull out at that point of time. And so we felt that what would be an effective way to try and ensure that we can increase our runway. At that point of time, it was around 6 months. It had fallen to 6 months to about 12 months. So the idea that we hit upon was a rights issue. So in March 2020, we had 16 funders and 6 months of runway. And the rights issue is a concept that most funders know of. Most people in the civil society space may not know of it. But essentially, when a corporate puts out new shares in the market, sometimes there is what is called a rights issue, where it goes to existing shareholders first, offering the shares to them first, that if they want to buy it, before it goes out into the market. So much like a corporate rights issue, we asked long-term patrons to double their support. And we asked long-term patrons to double their support, not as an investment in financial returns, because we can't offer any, but as a shared commitment to our mission. And what was that? We had productized at that point of time with one research product, which was called Lest We Forget. This was in the midst of COVID. And in the midst of COVID, there were several existential problems that we faced. One of those was that we looked at the problem of orphaned children in Maharashtra. Now, this said, it was making a lot of news that there were children being left abandoned outside homes in Maharashtra, and we had some competence in that area. And we saw that there was a huge mismatch, that here you had stories of hundreds of children who were left abandoned in Maharashtra at that point of time during COVID by parents who couldn't afford their upkeep. But at the same time, as in if you went to the website of the Central Adoption Resource Agency and you talked to adoption agencies, the number of children who were available for adoption and foster care in Maharashtra in April 2020 were 5. There were only 5 children whom you could adopt legally in Maharashtra at a time when there were thousands of children who were being abandoned. So we looked at that issue, we looked at what could be done, worked with the government of Maharashtra, came up with a set of systemic solutions. And there were 5 such issues where we got a range of funders interested and asked them to double their support. And in that period, during that rights issue, we went from 16 to 23 funders and 13 crores to 16.4 crores. And so the key lesson for us there was, one, look at the funding that you already have. It may be one funder, it may be a small funder, but you know that that funder is interested. It's not a question as to whether they are giving 5 lakhs or 5 crores. It's a question that they are interested and they are aligned with your particular vision. So how can we make sure that that funder continues to be part of that journey? And second is, we need to speak a language that also appeals and they understand. So this is what we came up with. In the interest of time, I'm going to go very quickly to the Vidhi for Good campaign. So in 2023, we were 10 years old. And at that point of time, we had a small corpus, which we hadn't asked, but one of our existing funders said that we have a little bit of extra liquidity, so would you like a corpus? And we were like, yeah, sure, love a corpus. Didn't think about it, but yeah, if you want to, sure. So the idea was, however, at the 10-year period, that can we now more seriously start thinking about an endowment so that we can think of the institution. So it was about broadening donor connections and encouraging corpus contributions. So this is some details. One thing that worked for us in that period, and I'll cut to the chase, is that we got 3 of our existing funders to host fundraising dinners. Now, this fundraising dinner actually had been a mythical concept for us for those 10 years. In every board meeting, some board member talked about it, that we should have a fundraising dinner, but it never quite happened for one reason or the other. The difference was that 10 years was essentially a kind of forcing device. It seemed like an occasion that you could celebrate. Second, we had funders who were willing to do it at their homes, which was very important. And 3, they had full buy-in. They were the ones who were doing the invites. They were the ones who were basically inviting friends and family. So we targeted 33 prospective funders and there was a 52% conversion. Corpus was, however, still hard. And I'll say that as far as a corpus campaign was concerned, Vidhi for Good was a failure. Okay, because one funder actually explained it very simply to me. He said, I can give you a corpus, but what will you do with the corpus? You will put it in a fixed deposit. You'll get 6.5%. I will give it to my wealth manager. He will give me 18%. So why should I give you a corpus? It doesn't make sense for you. It doesn't make sense for me. It doesn't make sense for the market. So what is the lesson that we draw? The lesson that we draw is the last one, is that we needed to secure multi-year commitments. That's actually what we were looking for. We were looking for sustainability. Corpus seems to be often a proxy for sustainability, but it doesn't have to be what sustainability is all about. What sustainability is all about is multi-year commitments. So we reinforce relationships with existing patrons, ensuring multi-year commitments. I'll just move on. And so what the results very quickly, so we had increased funder commitments. So it went on from 2019, 50% of our funders had multi-year commitments, and I'll finish in the next minute. It went up to 93%, and the growth in corpus did go up a little bit. It's not that it was completely unsuccessful, but not as much as we were hoping for a target of 33 crores actually. But what we got to was 10.6, and it continues to remain a work in progress. So lastly, two key learnings. One is corpus is hard. So, and I think that it doesn't make sense actually for organizations, certainly organizations like us, to look at a corpus in this current climate. There are tax related issues, and very simply financially, it doesn't make sense. We all need to focus on flexible multi-year commitments. Multi-year commitments give us the runway to ensure that this organization is going to work for 3 to 5 years. When I say multi-year, it's usually between 3 to 5 years. Second, it also gives newer funders the confidence that yes, someone is backing them for a long term, so I will also come in and back them. So this is what has worked for us over the course of the last 11 years, and these are just some of our learnings, and I think it would be useful for us to now have a discussion. This journey itself has been an incredibly challenging one. I'm a legal academic. I used to teach law. This is certainly not my gig, but over the course of time, I've realized that if there is one thing that every organization needs to do other than their core work, it's to be sustainable, because that's what we all need to do to survive. Thanks very much.
Questions, will you be able to say I can solve for all of them? Not really, but at least I hope we've got a lot of insights from this conversation, and many more to come through direct Q&A. Vidhi's also, have 48 publications, research publications out. They worked with 25 plus government projects on helping them, write regulations. So inspiring work. Thank you so much, Arghya, for sharing the journey and the reality of what is possible in the space of flexible funding. I have questions, but I think I'll just open up the stage because we have another 10 to 12 minutes, max 15 minutes pushed for the Q&A, so I will not come in the way. But if people have collected questions from ISDM team, then I'm happy to take and curate and ensure that we don't have overlaps and we are more targeted. Do we have that collected? Do we have it in any shape or form? No? Okay, so we can do direct Q&A? Okay, fine. So can I invite all the three speakers on the stage again? And after the Q&A, I have some very good insights to share from one of the studies that we have done on fundraising. So do wait for that insight before you leave the room. So that's like the, what you call? Hold point. The bonus, yeah, the bonus insights will come from that study that I'm going to share. So yes. So I don't need to sit here. They can just answer. It's all for you. I'm going to put my out of this. But yeah, please, it's open to everybody. We don't have questions. So if anybody doesn't have, then I have a lot of questions. So I'm assuming people have a lot of questions. Yes. Do we have mics to pass around?
So you shared with us that how the fund actually helped to build this organization, but one piece of information, very vital information, you also shared that it took them 7 years to raise the first check. So I'm just thinking from the perspective of smaller organization who are at a very initial stage of their journey, do not have those kind of funders or the corpus to sustain over 7 years. So is there any guidance for them?
Yeah, I think what OGQ did right was initially uh, get the right folks in terms of operations. So I think when Geet Sethi and Prakash Padukone started, uh, uh, it was just an sort of an idea that they had in mind and didn't really have that plan in place. And I think I would say it sort of really got operationalized when sort of Viren Raskina came into the picture, became the CEO in 2009. And I think having at least for OGQ, which is obviously in the sporting ecosystem, having an athlete at the forefront with also the right sort of credibility and experience. He's also an ISB alum, by the way. Having him as the CEO made a massive difference in terms of how we were able to scale up at that point. And I think having the right folks, I think both my colleagues here also sort of touched upon that. Having the right folks in the fundraising aspect of things is extremely crucial to take that first step. But I'm sure it takes a lot of time to get the wheels rolling. But I think once we were able to get that, then scalability was a little more easier than that in that sense. Yeah, I think a lot of things need to click along the way. For example, at OGQ, to having the right sort of research team to identify the right athletes, back them, and finally there was proof of concept that happened at the 2012 Olympics where we won four OGQ supported athletes won medals. So it's a combination of a lot of things that in the initial years, which is always the hard sort of years in that. And I think maybe my colleagues here might be able to also add
I
there.
can add a little bit. I think for us in our initial years, before we had a proof of concept and like just one or two people on the team, we actually did a mix of having a few individuals within our family friends network put in a little bit, but we also took a small loan from our board of directors, which we then paid off in the next 3-4 years when we started getting institutional donors. So that was how we started, the beginning, when we had absolutely no donors. But then I think beyond that, you just have to start diversifying and start. I think one of the things you mentioned, both of you, that if you get even one donor, to start getting those referrals or getting your peer organizations to referrals, but that has to start quicker. As soon as you have a little bit of a proof of concept, that has to start, which I think we delayed a little because we were so focused on the program that we didn't begin. When we had a really good donor on board, we not started. But to be honest, when we lost our donor, they made the referral to the next donor to give us a lifeline grant, and that really worked. Yeah.
And I think just quickly to add on, every organization is a small organization when it begins. So the fact is that right at the beginning, you start with an idea, and then you have to find one person that backs the idea. And I would say that in hindsight, what would make sense is start it only if you have at least a runway of a year. And so that in that year, as Anushri was saying, you use that person who believes in your idea, whatever extent they fund it, to refer to one more person. That's actually one thing that we have done. We ask all our board members and our funders in the first year, in the first 2 years, to refer to one person. And then you see some work, some don't work. So I think it builds out slowly. So, and then it starts with a trickle and then becomes a little bit more of a smoother flow.
Hi, am I audible? Yeah, my question is for Anushri. So you were speaking about program-specific funding as well, and I like that you spoke about flexibility. So specific to that, there are times when, especially when you're a younger organization and you don't have a lot of options when it comes to donors, donors come with certain expectations. And when it's program specific, an organization has specific objectives for each of the programs, but donors might be looking for something else as proof points. They might be looking at numbers, you might be looking at an impact that's more intangible. So while flexibility might work, I want to understand, can you talk a little more about how to bring that balance in being flexible but also not diluting your initial idea? to get that initial funding, especially when you're at the early stages of work?
Yeah, I think that's a really tough one. I think everybody would have experienced that, where there are times where you just can't say no. You need the money. And it may not be exactly what you want, but you say yes. And I have my colleague in the room who'll tell you we've been through some really like difficult experiences. But I think what we've tried to do in those circumstances is to say, okay, how do I engage with you and get you to buy into what we do, while I understand where you're coming from, right? Because donors are also in different places in their journey and maturity and giving, like where they are. So in some cases that's clicked and they've really kind of understood what we're doing and it's moved. In some cases it just hasn't. But then one choice we made was we said we'll let go of a funder when we are comfortable. When we've got a backup, that's when we let go of a relationship that we're not feeling is working. Especially when you're small and don't have enough and you have to keep your team going. We said that we will make sure we have a backup and then we will start that conversation of no. I don't think it's fair to just say no and then have no options and then tell your team, oh, I have to let you go. So I think we've done that too, but now we're a lot more assertive. And now we sort of say, this is what will work for us. Where are you at? And really try that conversation earlier. But I think we've done places where we said, okay, we'll do this. We'll engage with you. See if you understand us better and we understand you better. And if that's not the case, then start looking for backups. And that's where the retail fundraising was really a boon. Like it gave us like that flexibility to say, even if we lose this, we have like that runway going.
Yeah, thank you.
So this is for all three of you. So I know that, when we try for fundraising, etc., it doesn't mature immediately. There is a long period of engagement, marination time, right? So have you chosen to go to a few and stay put with them for a while, seeking funds and making yourself fundable? Or have you gone into a broad basing, like, let there be 30 opportunities that like a typical corporate thing, let there be 30 pipeline of 30 and therefore maybe 10-20% will convert, kind of a formula funding, because time on your hand is also limited, small team efforts, etc. So how have you sort of gone about it? So long pipeline, therefore get it, or?
I would say both, right? You have to do both. Like you have to keep the pipeline going. But I think like what you pointed out, you have to engage with the people you have. You can't take them for granted. If they're already invested, then they're willing to kind of put in more. And something somebody told us was that you have individuals who've put in money in retail. If you don't engage with them, that's like a missed opportunity. Because there are people who've clearly given you for some reason. And if you just treat them like, oh, they gave a small amount. So we started making calls and started seeing who we can engage. And I think engagement is really important, but you have to keep the pipeline going. And
Yeah, so practically, actually, I'm just trying to think back. We first hired a fundraiser in year 4 or 5 of our journey. And before that, it was just us, the founding team which used to do it. At that point of time, actually, we used to go out to a range of people, because while this may seem counterintuitive that you don't have a team but you're doing it, because we didn't have that much time to do research on people. We like, this looks interesting, they seem interesting, can the board connect? So actually we cast our net very wide in the first few years, because we actually didn't have time to do that much deep diving. Over a period of time, as in after we have our fundraising team, as in we realize that it makes much more sense to go deeper into the people who have, on the basis of some criteria, as in who have shown some degree of interest. So now we are very much about depth and holding on to a few people, continuing those conversations, going deeper rather than casting the net too wide.
Yeah, I just want to add on. Actually, completely agree with both. Right, it's a combination of both that we've also seen work. And I'd like to give an example. So the email communication that I spoke about, it doesn't just go out to the existing base of supporters. It goes out to all the people that we've reached out to as well. So it's sort of a constant update for them in terms of the work we are doing. And in fact, one of a big company recently, we had reached out to them about 2-3 years ago, but the communication kept happening. They didn't really follow through initially, but then 2-3 years later they themselves came back, and it finally had a sort of a big conversion. So I think that both sort of spreading that net wide and persistence both sort of add.
Thank you.
Hi. Uh, Before my question, I want to appreciate all the three speakers. I think since morning, your presentations was just on point. So thank you for that. My question is that in Adhyayan's model, we saw that there is a dependency on the program fee that comes. And I don't know the financial model for the other two organizations, but for financial sustainability, is it important, or how are you all looking at depending on the amount of money that comes from your programs or your products? So I would just want you all to throw a little bit light on that.
I can just share the rationale for us where we said that we want a certain percentage to be flexible, where we can experiment, focus on growth, but we also need to build a lot of those costs into programmatic costs because that's all towards the mission that you have. And we felt like if we have too much that's unrestricted, then what purpose is that going towards? Because finally the purpose is to make schools good. And if our program donors are we're not able to advocate for that, then there's something a little off in the way we're talking to them. So increasingly, whatever capacity grants we've been given through the unrestricted space, we've built it into our programs and made cases for that and built line items because we make a case to say that this is all towards that end. You can't just have one program team doing everything. There's a back end that supports it. You need to think of growth. You need to have other things in place. And so that's been our rationale where we said that keeping a good 70-80% focused on the program with all these other things built in helps us also keep a certain discipline to saying that it's all going towards that aim. And we keep that flexibility with the other money for reserves, emergencies, all of that. So that was the rationale we took, and we built a lot of those costs into our budgets. But maybe you all can share.
Yeah, so I just want to zoom out a little bit in answering that question. As in, when we started fundraising for Vidhi, this was around 2011. At that point of time, the philanthropic ecosystem was nowhere close to being as evolved as it is now. There was no conversation about flexible funding. It was essentially very much about projects. It was essentially about whether you have people who are aligned to your missions. And that's what it was about. So I think the fact that we are having this conversation here in 2024 is a maturing of the philanthropic ecosystem, that actually unrestricted funding, flexible funding, pay what it takes, these are all now conversations that are on the table, because we all realize that we might be running our own organizations or being part of organizations, but what we are doing here is much more than that. This is not just projects for education in Maharashtra or writing better laws or getting Olympic gold medalists, but this is also a sector. It is a sector that wants to make social impact at scale. And I think there is a realization within the funding ecosystem that if this has to move from project to organization to sector, then there has to be funding that allows for the organization to grow. The unsexy stuff like human resources, finance backend, communications, who's doing those newsletters, these are all critical things that are necessary for the organization itself to grow and for the sector to grow. And I think here, as in really hats off to Poonam, Amit, Gayatri, everyone at A.T.E, Chandra, who's done a great job in proselytizing this idea amongst the funding ecosystem that we need to have organizations that are sustainable so that the sector itself is sustainable. And for us, actually, part of that is, as in the you asked about the business model. We actually, right from, this is about year one, we told the government that we are happy to engage with you and we want to engage with you on this, but we are going to charge costs for the work that we do. This was an unconventional call. We had been dissuaded by many people to doing that, saying government will not do it. Maybe it was helped by the fact that we are lawyers, so people are used to paying lawyers in some sense. So I'll admit that, but it was not like we were charging legal fees. So I'll say that as well. But it's still about 20% of our overall budgetary outlay comes from revenues that we get from government projects because we take costs. So I think it's critical for all organizations to look at that component. It could be an unrestricted grant. It could be some sort of fee for service. It could be anything, but you need to have that component which is always your fallback. If that grantor goes out, if someone has a change of heart, then you always have a fallback. And I think it's critical to think in that fashion.
Feel free to mingle with them, but now the time for the hook insights. So this is like the daily soap, no? hold on to everybody's attention. Okay, very interestingly, because Amit comes from the financial background and we've done a lot of advocacy work in this sector, and we continue to do to promote and influence a lot of funding agencies to think about institution building in a very systematic and structured manner. So, borrowing the terms from the financial world, we tried and we have done a study on calculating the return on investment, fundraising investment, which means basically if an NGO is investing in their fundraising, building a team, building processes, training the team, what kind of returns it will generate, which means that if you are investing 1 rupee in your fundraising function, how much money it can unlock. Any guesses? 10, okay. 5, okay. 20, 50. Superb. We needed some bold answers there. So yeah, interesting. So we did the study with 11 of our partners who we've supported in last, 8 to 10 years, but we looked at intervention -3 and +3 to look at what has been the growth journey and what has been the return on investment. For every rupee invested, the median ROI is 42x, which shows the power of investment in fundraising as a critical function and not a by-the-way function. By the way, I also need to invest in fundraising. No, it's as important as building a program, because these are the guys who are bringing in money to run the program. So I think we had that very good insight. Another interesting insight from the study was that these organizations were growing at 20%, growth rate annually. So definitely much higher rate of growth compared to the ones who are not investing in these kind of, domains. So I thought and we're going to, of course, put out a lot of content, to the donor agencies and to the NGOs to say, how do we then build in these costs and make it a mainstream function in the organization and not like, back-end function. This is should be the forefront of everything that we do. So thank you so much, everybody, to be such a lovely audience. It's great to have all the lovely speakers here. Thank you, ISDM team, for giving us this opportunity to present this. And yes, we all look forward to the plenary session also on big bets.
Oh, we have one more last session left after this. But thank you so much for this session. I would request the team to felicitate all our panelists, followed by a group photograph. If you can just be on stage for a couple of more minutes.